Beloved friends, this morning, as the light breaks across the horizon and the dew still rests upon the grass, let us turn our hearts to that golden psalm, the shepherd's psalm, Psalm 23. Oh, how those words have echoed down through the ages, through valleys and over mountaintops, into hospital rooms, prison cells, and little country churches. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. When David declared, "The Lord is my shepherd," he was not reciting poetry for effect. He was confessing a living reality. David understood shepherding not as a theory, but as a life he had lived on the hillsides of Israel. He knew the smell of the sheep, the loneliness of the fields, the danger of wild beasts, and the responsibility of guarding helpless lives. So when he said, "The Lord is my shepherd," he was drawing from experience. He was saying, "The one who watches over me is more faithful than I ever was to my flock." Notice the power of that small word, my. Faith becomes effective when it becomes personal. It is not enough to say the Lord is a shepherd or the shepherd, or even our shepherd in a general sense. Many people acknowledge God collectively, but few embrace him personally. The strength of this psalm lies in ownership. My shepherd speaks of relationship, closeness, and daily communion. Sheep do not thrive at a distance. They must remain near the shepherd's voice. Likewise, believers cannot live on borrowed faith or secondhand testimonies. There must be a personal recognition that God is directly involved in the details of your life. A shepherd does not merely visit his sheep occasionally. He lives among them. He studies them. He knows their weaknesses, their tendencies, and their wounds. In the same way, when you call the Lord your shepherd, you are acknowledging that he knows you intimately, your fears before you speak them, your needs before you recognize them, your dangers before you sense them. This produces confidence. If he is truly your shepherd, then nothing enters your day without first passing his awareness. Sheep are not independent creatures. They are among the most dependent animals in creation. They cannot find safe pasture consistently without guidance. They cannot defend themselves effectively. They cannot even recover easily if they fall on their backs. They require constant oversight. When David called the Lord his shepherd, he was admitting human limitation. There is humility in that confession. Pride resists shepherding because pride wants control. But faith says, I cannot guide myself safely through this life. I need leadership greater than my own understanding. To say, the Lord is my shepherd, also means you trust his voice above all others. In a world filled with noise, opinions, fears, temptations, and distractions, the sheep learn to recognize one voice. The shepherd may call, and hundreds of sheep may be mingled together, but only his flock responds because they know the sound. Personal relationship sharpens spiritual discernment. When you spend time in prayer and reflection, you begin to sense his direction gently correcting your steps. It may not always be dramatic, but it is steady and faithful. There is also security in this confession. A shepherd assumes responsibility for the condition of his flock. If a sheep is lost, the shepherd seeks it. If one is injured, he binds it. If danger approaches, he stands between threat and vulnerability. Calling the Lord your shepherd is not merely comforting language. It is a declaration of divine oversight. You are not navigating life unguarded. You are not wandering without covering. Even when you feel uncertain, the shepherd remains certain. Personal relationship transforms anxiety into assurance. If God is distant, then provision feels uncertain. But if he is your shepherd, then care is constant. The relationship is not seasonal, it is daily. Each morning, the sheep rise under the same watchful eye that guarded them through the night. In the same way, when you awaken to a new day, the shepherd who sustained you yesterday is already present today. This personal claim invites surrender. You cannot truly call him shepherd while insisting on leading yourself. Sheep that wander away place themselves in danger. The blessing of Psalm 23 begins not with abundance, but with alignment. When you accept him as your shepherd, you choose to follow. And in that following, you discover peace that does not depend on circumstances, strength that does not depend on your own ability, and confidence rooted in relationship rather than control. When David said, "I shall not want," he was not speaking from the throne of luxury, but from the assurance of relationship. This statement flows directly from the confession. The Lord is my shepherd. It is not a declaration of personal wealth. It is a declaration of divine sufficiency. David had known days of abundance and days of hiding in caves, yet his confidence did not rest in possessions. It rested in the faithfulness of God. To say, "I shall not want," is to declare that when the Lord governs your life, lack loses its power to create fear. Human desire is endless. We want security, recognition, comfort, success, certainty about tomorrow. Even when one need is met, another arises. But the shepherd understands what the sheep truly require. Sheep may wander toward barren ground, thinking it is sufficient, yet the shepherd leads them to nourishing pasture. In the same way, divine provision does not always align with human craving. Sometimes God withholds what we think we need because he sees a greater necessity we cannot perceive. Provision, then, is not about satisfying every appetite, but about sustaining life and purpose. "I shall not want" does not mean there will never be challenges. It means that in the midst of challenges, there will be enough strength to endure, enough wisdom to decide, enough grace to forgive, enough peace to sleep. The promise addresses the deeper needs of the soul, not merely the surface desires of the flesh. Many people possess material abundance and yet live in spiritual poverty. David's confidence was rooted in something greater than external comfort. He trusted that under God's care, he would never lack what was essential to fulfill his calling. There is a difference between abundance and excess. Excess often leads to distraction, but abundance in God's economy means fullness of supply for his purpose. When the shepherd provides, it is measured perfectly. He knows how much pasture is needed for the day. He knows how much water will refresh without overwhelming. Divine provision is precise. It may not always arrive early by human expectation, but it is never late by divine design. This promise also confronts anxiety. Much of human worry revolves around, what if I don't have enough? Enough resources, enough opportunity, enough protection. Fear magnifies tomorrow's uncertainty. But when you accept the Lord as shepherd, you are entrusting tomorrow's supply to today's faithfulness. Sheep do not store pasture for months ahead. They trust the shepherd's ongoing guidance. Likewise, I shall not want is a daily confession. It does not calculate years in advance. It rests in present care. Gratitude grows from this understanding. When you believe that God is your provider, contentment replaces comparison. You no longer measure your life against others to determine sufficiency. You recognize that what the shepherd has allotted to you is intentional. Envy fades when trust increases. The heart becomes steady because it is anchored in divine oversight rather than fluctuating circumstance. Provision also includes correction. Sometimes what we lack is discipline, direction, or renewed focus. The shepherd provides these through guidance and even restraint. What appears as limitation may actually be protection. A closed door may preserve you from harm. A delayed opportunity may prepare you for greater responsibility. In this way, provision extends beyond material needs into the shaping of character. When David declared, "I shall not want," he was expressing settled confidence. It was not arrogance, nor was it denial of hardship. It was trust formed through experience. He had seen danger, betrayal, and uncertainty, yet he had also witnessed divine deliverance repeatedly. That history produced assurance. Faith remembers past faithfulness and applies it to present need. To live in this promise is to release the constant striving that drains the soul. It is to work diligently while trusting ultimately. It is to plan responsibly without surrendering to fear. Under the shepherd's care, lack is never final and need is never ignored. There may be seasons of stretching, but there will always be sustaining grace. He leadeth me beside the still waters. These words reveal something tender about the nature of God's guidance. A shepherd does not drive sheep from behind with constant force. He walks ahead and calls them forward. The movement is relational, not mechanical. Divine guidance is not harsh compulsion, but steady direction. It is leadership shaped by care. When David spoke of being led, he was describing a life positioned under intentional direction rather than random wandering. Still waters are essential for sheep. Rapid rushing streams can frighten them. Turbulent water is difficult and even dangerous for them to drink from. A wise shepherd searches for calm places where the flock can safely refresh themselves. In the same way, God's guidance is marked by peace. His direction may require courage, but it is not rooted in confusion. There is a settled assurance that accompanies his leading. Even when circumstances are complex, the inner witness of peace acts like still water to the soul. Many people live driven lives. They are pushed by pressure, ambition, fear of failure, or comparison. This kind of motion exhausts the spirit. But being led is different from being driven. To be led implies trust. It means you are attentive to a voice beyond your own impulses. It requires slowing down enough to discern direction. The shepherd's voice is not always loud, but it is consistent. Guidance often comes through quiet conviction rather than dramatic display. Supernatural guidance does not eliminate responsibility. The sheep must choose to follow. A shepherd may call, but the flock must respond. In spiritual life, this means cultivating awareness, prayer reflection, and obedience sharpen the ability to recognize direction. When a person consistently ignores inner conviction, sensitivity dulls. But when one responds faithfully to small promptings, clarity increases. Guidance becomes more natural because relationship deepens. Still waters also symbolize restoration of strength. Movement without rest weakens any creature. The shepherd understands rhythm. There are times for walking and times for refreshing. Divine guidance includes both action and pause. Some of the most important steps in life are not forward strides, but moments of stillness where clarity is regained. In quiet places, perspective is restored. Decisions formed in haste often lead to regret, but decisions shaped in stillness carry wisdom. There is protection in being led. Sheep that wander independently expose themselves to danger. Terrain may appear harmless at a distance, but conceal hidden threats. The shepherd sees from a higher vantage point. He knows where predators roam and where ground is unstable. To accept guidance is to accept limited perspective. It is humility acknowledging that human understanding cannot foresee every outcome. Trusting divine leadership means believing that unseen awareness is greater than visible circumstance. Guidance in paths of righteousness also speaks to moral direction. The shepherd does not simply lead to comfort. He leads to what is right. There are easier paths that promise quicker satisfaction, but they may compromise integrity. Righteous paths sometimes require patience and perseverance, yet they lead to long-term peace rather than short-term pleasure. Being led by God means aligning decisions with His character, even when alternatives appear attractive. Confusion often arises when people attempt to lead themselves while asking for God's blessing. Guidance requires surrender. You cannot simultaneously insist on your own route and expect divine direction. The posture of being led involves openness. It means saying, direct my steps, and then being willing to adjust when conviction nudges differently than personal preference. There is also comfort in knowing that guidance is continuous. The shepherd does not abandon the flock midway. He remains present from pasture to water, from valley to table. When direction seems unclear, it is not because guidance has ceased, but because attentiveness may need renewal. Returning to quietness often restores clarity. To live under supernatural guidance is to move through life with steady assurance. It does not mean every detail is explained in advance. Often, only the next step is revealed. But that is enough. The shepherd's faithfulness in small directions builds confidence for larger ones. Step by step, beside still waters, the soul learns that being led is safer than leading alone. He restoreth my soul. These words reach deeper than physical strength. They speak to the inner life where weariness often hides. The soul grows tired long before the body shows signs of exhaustion. Disappointment, prolonged stress, unanswered questions, and quiet battles of the heart can slowly drain joy and clarity. Restoration is not merely relief from circumstances. It is renewal of the inner man. It is the shepherd bending down to lift what has grown weak. Sheep are known to become cast, meaning they fall onto their backs and cannot right themselves. Left in that position, they become vulnerable and helpless. A faithful shepherd watches carefully for such moments, because if the sheep is not restored quickly, it can perish. In the same way, people can find themselves spiritually overturned by fear, guilt, failure, or grief. They may appear functional outwardly, yet inwardly feel unable to stand. Restoration is God's response to that condition. He does not condemn the fallen. He lifts them. Restoration implies previous vitality. Something that is restored once possessed strength. Life has seasons that deplete enthusiasm and confidence. Responsibilities increase. Losses occur. Dreams shift. The soul can slowly lose its sense of direction. Yet the shepherd's ministry includes renewal. He does not simply command endurance. He supplies refreshing. His presence has a way of bringing balance back to distorted emotions and stability, back to anxious thoughts. Renewal often begins in quiet surrender. Just as sheep must remain still for the shepherd to help them, the human spirit must pause to receive divine care. Restoration cannot be forced through striving. It comes through yielding. In prayer, reflection, and honest confession, the soul opens itself to healing. There are burdens carried too long, regrets replayed too often, fears magnified unnecessarily. When these are placed into the shepherd's hands, heaviness begins to lift. Fresh oil is another image tied to restoration. Oil in ancient times symbolized healing, soothing, and consecration. It softened wounds and protected against irritation. Spiritually, fresh oil represents renewed strength and clarity for the present day. Yesterday's encouragement cannot fully sustain today's challenge. Each morning requires new grace. Restoration is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process. The shepherd provides what is needed for the current season. Restoration also involves correction. Sometimes the soul becomes weary because it has strayed from healthy patterns. Overcommitment, misplaced priorities, or neglected spiritual discipline can create imbalance. The shepherd gently redirects. This redirection may feel uncomfortable at first, yet it leads back to stability. Healing often requires adjustment. The path of righteousness is not only morally right, it is emotionally and spiritually sound. There is compassion in restoration. The shepherd understands the fragility of his flock. He does not restore with frustration, but with patience. Human beings are often harsh with themselves, replaying failures and magnifying shortcomings. Divine restoration replaces condemnation with hope. It acknowledges weakness without defining identity by it. When the soul is restored, perspective changes. Problems that once seemed overwhelming are placed within a larger framework of trust. Renewal of the soul also renews vision. Awareness clouds judgment. It narrows focus to immediate discomfort. But when restoration occurs, purpose becomes visible again. The journey regains meaning. Strength returns not merely to endure, but to continue moving forward. The shepherd does not restore simply to maintain survival. He restores to sustain progress. There are moments when restoration is dramatic, felt deeply and immediately. Other times it is gradual, like dawn slowly replacing darkness. Both forms are valid. The key is the shepherd's nearness. Restoration is evidence of relationship. It reveals ongoing care rather than distant oversight. Even when depletion feels heavy, it is not permanent under divine attention. The one who created the soul understands how to renew it completely. Yeah. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. These words do not deny the existence of valleys. They acknowledge them openly. Life inevitably brings low places, seasons of uncertainty, grief, opposition, or deep testing. The psalm does not promise exemption from such terrain. Instead, it promises presence within it. The confidence is not in the absence of danger, but in companionship through it. A valley is a place between mountains. It is often narrow, shadowed, and difficult to navigate. Light reaches it only partially, and visibility can be limited. Spiritually, valleys represent those periods when clarity fades and answers seem distant. The path may feel constricted, and options appear few. Yet the psalm says, I walk through. Movement continues even in the shadow. The valley is not a permanent residence. It is a passage. Notice that it is called the valley of the shadow of death. A shadow has shape and appearance, but it lacks substance. It can intimidate, but it cannot harm by itself. Fear often magnifies shadows, giving them weight they do not truly possess. When David speaks of fearing no evil, he is not claiming courage rooted in personality. He is expressing trust rooted in presence. For thou art with me changes the atmosphere of the valley. The difference between despair and endurance is often awareness of companionship. Fear thrives in isolation. When a person believes they are alone in hardship, anxiety grows. But divine presence interrupts that narrative. The shepherd does not remain on the mountaintop while the sheep descend into difficulty. He walks beside them. His nearness transforms the meaning of the valley. What could have been a place of defeat becomes a place of deeper trust. Confidence is strengthened not by avoiding trials, but by surviving them with assurance. The rod and the staff symbolize protection and guidance. The rod was a defensive instrument used to ward off predators. The staff, with its curved end, was used to guide and rescue sheep that wandered too close to danger. Together they represent authority and tenderness. Protection does not always mean the removal of threat. Sometimes it means empowerment to endure while danger is held at bay. Guidance in the valley ensures that missteps do not lead to greater harm. Comfort in this context is not mere emotional soothing. It is steady reassurance grounded in active care. The shepherd is not passive. He watches attentively. He intervenes when necessary. He corrects direction when the path grows uncertain. In valleys, the awareness of that attentive oversight brings stability to the heart. The soul may tremble initially, but repeated evidence of faithfulness builds resilience. Walking through a valley often develops qualities that mountaintops cannot. Strength, patience, compassion, and humility are refined in low places. Without valleys, faith remains untested and therefore shallow. The shadow terrain deepens reliance. It strips away illusions of self-sufficiency. In that vulnerability, dependence becomes clearer. The shepherd's role becomes more central, more tangible. There is also perspective gained in recognizing that valleys lie between peaks. They are part of a larger journey. The presence of one does not eliminate the promise of another mountaintop ahead. Movement through difficulty carries the assurance that terrain changes. Even when the surroundings appear dark, progress continues step by step. Fear diminishes as trust increases. The psalm does not deny the reality of evil. It declares its limited authority. When the shepherd is present, evil cannot ultimately prevail. Shadows stretch only as far as light permits. And where the shepherd walks, light is never fully absent. The valley may test the heart, but it cannot conquer a soul anchored in divine companionship. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. These words shift the scene from valley to banquet, from shadow to abundance. Yet what makes this image remarkable is not simply the table. It is where the table is placed. It is prepared in the presence of enemies. The conflict has not disappeared. Opposition has not been removed. Still, provision and honor are displayed openly. A prepared table speaks of intention. It is not accidental or hurried. It suggests planning, care, and welcome. The shepherd becomes host, arranging nourishment with deliberate attention. This is not survival rations handed out in fear. It is a feast arranged with confidence. The enemies may observe, but they cannot interfere. Their presence does not cancel provision. Instead, it highlights the shepherd's authority. Blessing is not postponed until circumstances improve. It appears right in the middle of tension. There is a powerful message in this placement. Often, people believe peace will come only after struggles are resolved. They wait for conflict to end before expecting joy. Yet this psalm reveals a deeper truth. Divine peace and provision can coexist with unresolved challenges. The table is set while enemies remain visible. This changes perspective. Instead of focusing on threats, attention shifts to what has been provided. Fear loses its dominance when gratitude takes its place. Anointing with oil carries rich meaning. In ancient times, oil refreshed, healed, and signified honor. It soothed wounds and protected against irritation. To have one's head anointed was to be recognized and valued. Spiritually, this anointing represents renewal of strength and affirmation of identity. In the presence of opposition, God does not merely sustain, He affirms. He declares worth and purpose, even when voices of criticism or hostility attempt to diminish them. The image of oil flowing over the head also suggests abundance beyond bare necessity. It is not a drop placed sparingly. It is generous. This generosity speaks to the character of the shepherd. His provision is not grudging. He does not measure blessings with reluctance. Even in contested territory, he pours freely. The anointing shields the mind, calming anxious thoughts and strengthening resolve. My cup runneth over extends the theme of abundance. A cup filled to the brim would already signify sufficiency. But an overflowing cup goes beyond need into excess. It suggests joy that cannot be contained, grace that exceeds expectation. Overflow is not accidental. It reflects abundance from the source. When the shepherd supplies, there is more than enough for endurance and even for sharing. Overflow also changes posture. A person living from scarcity clutches tightly, fearful of loss. But one whose cup runs over can extend generosity. Blessing received becomes blessing distributed. Even in the presence of enemies, kindness can flow. This does not ignore reality. It transcends it. The focus is no longer on what others threaten to take, but on what God continues to provide. There is boldness in sitting at a table while enemies watch. It reflects trust and protection. You do not feast comfortably if you doubt security. The shepherd's authority creates a boundary enemies cannot cross. Their observation becomes a testimony rather than a threat. What was meant to intimidate becomes a backdrop for divine faithfulness. This scene reveals a mature faith. It no longer depends on favorable conditions. It thrives even when opposition lingers. The heart learns that blessing is not fragile. It does not collapse under scrutiny. Instead, it shines more brightly. The table, the oil, the overflowing cup, all declare that the shepherd's provision is stronger than adversity and more enduring than conflict. So as the sun rises on this day, make this your morning prayer. Lord, be my shepherd today. Lead me where I cannot see. Provide where I cannot supply. Protect where I cannot defend. Restore what has been drained. Guide my steps in righteousness. And when shadows fall, remind me that you are walking beside me. Surely, surely, goodness and mercy shall follow you. Not maybe, not perhaps, surely. And you shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Walk into this day with confidence. The shepherd goes before you. The shepherd walks beside you. And at the close of this day, the shepherd will still be faithful. Amen.